My name is Matthew Cain, and for as long as I can remember, fire has captivated me. Not in a reckless or dangerous way, but with a profound sense of duty. Growing up in a small town on the outskirts of California's rugged wildlands, I witnessed firsthand how fires could carve paths of destruction, threatening both lives and livelihoods. My father was a firefighter before me, and I grew up watching him face those towering infernos with a blend of bravery and humility. To him, it was never just a job, it was a calling. When I turned 20, I chose to walk the same path, joining the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. For over 2 decades, firefighting became my entire world. I lived it, breathed it. Every call was an opportunity to make a difference, to protect others, and to offer a glimmer of hope amidst devastation. Faith has always been a part of my life. I felt God's presence both in the firehouse and on the front lines. It's hard not to when you're stepping into situations where the odds are stacked against you, yet somehow, you manage to emerge on the other side. There were moments when I thought I could hear him in the roar of the flames or see his hand in the way things unfolded. Faith has always been a part of my life. I've felt God's presence both in the firehouse and on the front lines. It's hard not to when you're stepping into situations where the odds are stacked against you, yet somehow, you manage to emerge on the other side. There were moments when I thought I could hear him in the roar of the flames or see his hand in the way things unfolded. But in recent years, something changed. The fires became more intense, larger, hotter, and increasingly unpredictable. What used to be a fire season now felt like a relentless year-round battle. Entire towns were reduced to ashes in mere hours. No matter how hard we fought, it always seemed like we were falling behind. I couldn't help but question why. Was it sheer bad luck, the impact of climate change, or was there something deeper at play? These thoughts weighed heavily on me, especially during the wildfires of 2025. Those fires were unlike anything I had ever encountered. They didn't just consume forests and homes, they felt personal, almost as if they had a mind of their own, striking every weak spot they could find. Even after years of experience, I found myself feeling powerless, as though I was facing an enemy I couldn't fully grasp or combat. During that time, I turned to prayer more than ever, seeking guidance, strength, and understanding. Yet instead of answers, I was met with growing uncertainty. Was I truly making an impact? Was my work still part of God's plan? Then came the morning of January 15th, a day that started like so many others. I was on duty as part of a task force deployed to battle one of the largest wildfires in Southern California. Our team had been working tirelessly for days, taking short breaks whenever possible to regain some strength. The air was heavy with smoke, casting an eerie orange hue over the landscape. Even after all these years, I had never quite gotten used to it. The metallic taste of the air, the way the heat seemed to settle deep into my bones. There was no time to dwell on my thoughts. Lives were on the line. Around 7 a.m., we received the call. A small community along the fire's edge had been evacuated, but a few people were still unaccounted for. Some were elderly, unable to evacuate quickly, while others had stayed behind, trying desperately to protect their homes. It wasn't safe for them to remain, and our job was to get them out before the flames closed in. I had been on countless missions like this before, but something about today felt different. A nagging feeling settled in my chest. Today would be a turning point. I just didn't know why. When we arrived, the fire was still several miles away, but the wind was picking up, a dangerous sign. Wildfires moved fast enough on their own, but with the wind behind them, they became unstoppable. We split into teams, going door to door to ensure everyone was accounted for. Most homes were already empty, their residents long gone. But in one house, we found an elderly woman, unable to leave on her own. She sat in her chair, clutching a worn photo album tightly to her chest, tears streaking her face. "I didn't want to leave," she said, her voice trembling. "This is all I have left." I knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll keep you safe," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You can bring the album, but we have to go now." She clutched it tightly, hesitating, but then gave a small nod. I carried her to our truck where a teammate took over, ready to transport her to safety. As I turned back to the neighborhood, a sudden gust of wind hit, stronger and more unpredictable. A chill ran down my spine. Grabbing my radio, I called in. "Command, this is Cain. The wind's picking up. We need to move fast." "Copy that," came the reply. "Fire's moving faster than expected. Stay sharp." We quickened our pace, checking the last houses. Most were empty, but in one we found a young father frantically packing, his children clinging to him in tears. "I can't leave everything," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "You have to," I said firmly. "Things can be replaced. Your lives can't." He hesitated, but his kid's desperate grip convinced him. We rushed them to the truck, loading up just as flames crested the hill behind their house. The roar was deafening, like a freight train bearing down. I turned to my partner. "We need to move, now." Then the wind shifted and suddenly fire was everywhere. The fire moved faster than I thought possible, cutting us off from the main road. Thick smoke swallowed everything and the heat pressed against us like a suffocating wave. My radio crackled weakly. "Cain, what's your status?" "We're trapped," I coughed, scanning for an escape. Panic clawed at my chest, but I pushed it down. "God, I need you now!" A narrow dirt trail appeared through the smoke and we took it, fire closing in behind us. Embers rattled against the windshield, heat seeping through the truck's frame. My hands gripped the wheel, forcing us forward. My partner shouted, but the roar of the flames drowned him out. All I could do was pray. Then everything faded into darkness. For a moment I thought it was the end. But what happened next changed everything. I opened my eyes, disoriented. The world around me was unlike anything I'd ever known. Gentle light surrounded me, not the harsh glare of hospital fluorescence or the flickering orange of fire, but a radiance that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It wasn't just light, it was warmth, seeping into my very core. The first thing I noticed was the stillness. I had lived in chaos, the roar of flames, the wail of sirens, the shouts of my team. But here, there was peace. But this silence was different, full, not empty, carrying a meaning beyond words. I looked down, expecting to see my hands, my worn boots, but I wasn't there. Not in the way I had always known. My body, the one that had endured so much, was gone. Yet I had never felt more alive, more real, as if everything physical had fallen away, leaving only my true essence, my soul. Then, I felt the peace. It wasn't just around me, it filled me completely. Weightless, unburdened, free from worry and exhaustion, a stillness so profound it would have brought tears to my eyes, if I still had them. For a moment, I wondered if I was dead. The thought should have scared me, but it didn't. Instead, it felt like an answer to a question I had never dared to ask. If this was death, it was beautiful. The light around me wasn't just light, it was alive, shifting into colors and patterns beyond description. I didn't just see it, I felt it within and around me. And then I sensed the presence. It defied words. Not a person, not a voice, but an awareness that filled everything. It was love. Pure, absolute love. Not a love earned by achievements, but one that simply was. A love I had only glimpsed before, now surrounding me completely. It saw me, every failure, every doubt, every mistake. Yet it did not turn away. I lingered in that presence, letting it wash over me. There was no judgment, only acceptance, an embrace that made me feel whole, as if every broken piece had been restored. Yet even in the peace, questions stirred. Where was I? Was this heaven? There were no gates, no angels, only mystery. What now? No answers came, but I sensed they would. Glimpses of the world I had left behind emerged, faint at first, then clearer. I saw my body slumped inside the fire truck, smoke curling around me, my partner calling for help. Paramedics arrived, urgency on their faces, but I felt no fear. Seeing my lifeless form was like looking at an old coat I had outgrown. Then my attention shifted to the fire. It wasn't just flames, it moved with intent, and within it, dark, writhing figures, neither human nor beast, but full of malice. They fed on destruction, growing stronger with every flicker of chaos. I wanted to turn away, but I couldn't. I was meant to see. The world I had known wasn't just physical, it was layered with unseen spiritual forces. As this realization settled, the presence around me intensified. The radiant light pulsed, and I knew I was no longer alone. Someone was coming, or perhaps they had always been there, unfolding into my awareness. I turned and saw him. He was beyond anything I had imagined, yet deeply familiar, like I had known him all my life without realizing it. His presence was powerful yet gentle, overwhelming yet comforting. I didn't need to ask who he was, I already knew. And then I saw him, the one I never expected. In that moment, everything changed. Time seemed to slow, stretching a single instant into something infinite. But it wasn't just my reality that shifted, it was everything. He wasn't bound by space or time. His presence filled everything, near yet everywhere at once. His face radiated pure love, and his expression carried a tenderness that felt achingly familiar, like I had known him forever. I didn't need to ask. Deep down, I knew. Jesus. The realization hit like a wave, fear, awe, gratitude, and unworthiness flooding me all at once. My knees buckled and I bowed, not out of obligation but because I couldn't do anything else. His presence didn't crush me, it lifted me, embraced me, made me feel more alive than ever. "Matthew," he said, My name in his voice was truth, love, and purpose woven into something beyond words. Do not be afraid. I wanted to say I wasn't, but I was, of what this moment meant, of why I was here. Yet his voice melted my fear, replacing it with peace, with trust. You have questions, he said. Ask them. I looked up, my voice trembling. Why am I here? Why me? He smiled, filled with infinite compassion. Because I love you, he said. And because you have a purpose. Purpose. I had spent my life searching for it, fighting fires, saving lives, trying to make a difference. But chaos had clouded my vision, and now he was telling me it was still there. But why now? Why this way? I asked. You will understand, he replied gently. But first, you must see. Reality shifted around us, peeling back layers I had never known. Suddenly we looked down at the world I had left behind. Fires raged, consuming everything. But now, I saw something deeper, something darker. These fires, Jesus said, his voice heavy with sorrow, are not just natural disasters. Within the flames, shadowy figures writhed with sinister intent. They weren't just fire, they were something more, something spiritual, something alive. They weren't human, yet an undeniable malice lurked within them. I watched as they twisted and fed off destruction, growing stronger with every acre devoured, every home reduced to ash. What are they? I whispered. They are the fruits of spiritual corruption, he said. Generations have turned away, choosing the world over truth. His words weighed on me. Selfishness, fear, hatred had birthed this darkness. But why allow it? I asked, my voice trembling. Because I love them, he replied. Love does not force, it invites, it waits. These fires are both warning and mercy, revealing darkness and calling it to the light. I gazed at the endless destruction. What can I do? I'm just one person. He placed a hand on my shoulder, his love overwhelming. You have a voice and a story. What you've seen is not just for you. Doubt crept in. What if they don't listen? He smiled. Some won't, but others will. Your task is to be faithful. I swallowed hard. Why me? I'm just a firefighter. That is why I chose you, he said, because you serve with humility. His gaze pierced my doubts. You have been faithful with little. Now I entrust you with much. His eyes held eternity, yet radiated love. Then, with quiet authority, he said, Matthew, tell them. As his words settled, the fires sharpened. No longer just flames, but forces pulsing with dark intent. Shadowy figures moved within, feeding on destruction, orchestrating chaos. These fires are not just wild, Jesus said. They reflect a deeper spiritual reality. My heart pounded. What do you mean? His gaze was sorrowful, yet compassionate. They are born from a world that has turned from me, manifestations of choices made over generations. Each flame, he explained, symbolized spiritual apathy, disconnection, and self over truth. The vision shifted. I saw crowded cities, people lost in their screens, families silent, churches full but empty of devotion. A deep void had taken hold. This, Jesus said, is the world's spiritual landscape. The fires mirror those within, flames of greed, fear, and pride. His words weighed heavily. But why? I asked. Why turn away? He sighed. It's not always deliberate. Many don't reject me outright. They simply let other things take my place. I saw people consumed by distractions, comfort over conviction, entertainment over engagement, self over sacrifice. These small compromises, he said, create distance until truth fades. The fires raged across California, anchored to dark spiritual roots, pulsing with oppressive energy. What can be done? I asked, my voice shaking. Not all is lost, Jesus said, hope in his voice. There are still lights, those who remain faithful, standing in love and truth. I saw small clusters of light, families in prayer, communities serving, individuals standing firm. In these places, the fires weakened. These lights, he continued, are my people. Their love and devotion form a shield, not just for themselves but for others. Hope stirred within me, yet the darkness loomed large. Is it enough? I asked. Jesus met my gaze. That depends. Will my people awaken? This battle is spiritual. Human effort alone cannot win it. This is why you are here, Matthew, he said. You must tell them. No strategy can extinguish these fires. The answer lies in turning back to me. His words weighed heavy, humbling and overwhelming me. How? I whispered. How do I make them see? Speak the truth, he said. Tell them what you've seen. Some will listen, some won't. But your task is to remain faithful, to be a light in the darkness. The vision shifted, revealing two futures. In one, the fires consumed everything. Land, lives, and hope. In the other, the points of light multiplied, forming a network of faith and love that held back the darkness. The fires remained but were weakened by transformed hearts and minds. "Time is running out," Jesus said urgently. "Tell them I love them. The time for hesitation is over. They must choose." He placed a hand on my shoulder, his love almost overwhelming. "Remember," he said, "every act of faith, every prayer, every sacrifice sends ripples through the spiritual realm. Even the smallest light pushes back the deepest darkness." As the vision faded, his final words echoed in my heart. "The fires are a warning," he said, "but also an invitation to return to truth. Share this message and know I'm with you always." Then he spoke words that would haunt me forever. Suddenly, I felt the weight of my body. After what seemed like an eternity in light and peace, the return to physicality was jarring. Gravity pressed down, my chest rising and falling with labored breaths. Distant beeping and hushed voices reached me. I was back. Memories flooded in. Jesus, the love, the fires. Everything was vivid, etched into my soul. Yet now, the world felt like a shadow of something greater. "Matthew!" Emma's voice broke through the haze. She stood beside my hospital bed, clutching my hand, her face pale and exhausted. Relief flooded her eyes as mine fluttered open. "Oh, thank God," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. I tried to speak, but only a hoarse rasp escaped. She quickly offered water, helping me sip. The coolness soothed my throat, but not the storm within me. How could I tell her? While my body lay lifeless here, I had been somewhere else, somewhere more real than anything I'd known. This world suddenly felt fleeting, insubstantial. The door creaked open. My children, Ellie and Noah, peeked inside, their worried eyes searching mine. "Daddy?" Ellie's voice trembled. "I'm okay," I croaked, forcing a smile. But I wasn't, not yet. They rushed to my side, their tiny hands gripping mine as if afraid I might disappear again. Emma kissed my forehead, her tears warm. "You scared us," she said, her smile trembling. "The doctor said you were gone, that you shouldn't even be here." I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in. She was right. By all logic, I had died. My heart had stopped. But she couldn't know what I had seen, what I had been told. And now I was back, with a message burning inside me like an unshakable fire. One by one, more people filled the room. My fellow firefighters, my parents, even my captain. Their faces reflected relief, their voices blending in a comforting hum of gratitude. They took turns checking in, grateful I had survived. I tried to engage, but my mind kept drifting back to the vision, to Jesus' words. "You must tell them." The command weighed heavily on my heart, impossible to ignore. Later that evening, when the room quieted and it was just Emma and me, she sat beside me, concern and love in her eyes. "Matthew," she said softly, "there's something different about you, I can see it." My heart pounded. How could I explain? Would she believe me or think it was trauma playing tricks on my mind? But I couldn't keep it from her. Not from Emma. Taking a deep breath, I began. My voice was shaky at first, but as I spoke, certainty replaced fear. I told her about the light, the peace, and the overwhelming love. I described Jesus, his presence, the vision of fires, the shadows, the battle, and finally, his call to share it all. Emma listened in silence, her eyes never leaving mine. I braced for doubt, but instead I saw something else, understanding. When I finished, she squeezed my hand tightly. "Matthew," she said, "I believe you." Tears filled my eyes. "You do?" She nodded. "I can feel it. You're different. You're not the same man who left for work that day." Her belief gave me the courage I needed. In the following days I began sharing my story, first with family, then close friends. Each time fear gripped me, uncertain of their reactions. But to my surprise, most listened with open hearts. Some cried, others asked questions. A few admitted they had felt the same unease about the world. Not everyone was receptive. Some dismissed my experience as a hallucination, a product of oxygen deprivation. "You've been through a lot, Matt," a coworker said, patting my shoulder. "Don't overthink it." Their skepticism hurt, but it didn't shake my resolve. I knew what I had seen. Jesus' words echoed in my mind whenever doubt crept in. "Tell them what you have seen. Be faithful, and leave the rest to me." By the time I was discharged, I felt stronger, not just physically, but spiritually. The world outside felt different, every moment significant, every interaction an opportunity to share the message I had been given. Stepping into the sunlight, I knew my life would never be the same. Months have passed since I woke up in that hospital bed, gasping for air after what can only be described as a miracle. At first, sharing my vision felt impossible. How could I explain something so profound, so beyond human understanding? How could I tell people that the fires consuming their world were more than disasters? that they were symptoms of a deeper spiritual battle. And yet I had no choice. Tell them what you have seen. I started with my family and close friends. To my surprise, many listened. Some cried, moved by the love I described. Others admitted they too sensed a growing emptiness in their lives. Those early conversations planted seeds. Soon word spread, and I found myself speaking at churches, community centers, even schools. Standing before crowds, trembling with nerves and conviction, I recounted the vision, the fires, the darkness feeding on apathy, and the points of light pushing back. Each time I delivered the core message. The fires are a warning, but also an invitation. We are being called back to faith, love, and truth. Not everyone believed. Some mocked, others rationalized, but I pressed on. Matthew, they'd say, you've been through trauma, your mind is just trying to make sense of it. I didn't argue, I couldn't force anyone to believe. My job was simply to be faithful and share the message. For those ready to hear it, the truth resonated. Slowly, I saw the ripple effects. Families reconnecting in prayer, churches refocusing on worship and purpose, and people replacing fear and anger with kindness and support. It wasn't just about religion, it was faith in action, living with intention, love, and truth. The most incredible part? These small acts of faith transformed entire communities. In places where love and unity took root, the spiritual atmosphere shifted. The darkness that once felt heavy began to lift. Even the fires, though destructive, seemed less overwhelming, spiritual light pushing back against destruction. My life changed in ways I never imagined. Sharing the message brought me closer to my family and community, but most importantly, to God. Doubts and fears gave way to peace and purpose. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew I was on the right path. Of course, it hasn't been easy. Some days, the weight of this message feels overwhelming. I wonder if I'm doing enough, if it's making a difference. But then I remember Jesus' words, "Be faithful and leave the rest to me." I'm not responsible for changing hearts. That's God's work. My job is to share the truth, and trust it will reach those who need it. As I reflect on everything that's happened, I'm overwhelmed with gratitude for this second chance, for the love around me, and for the opportunity to share this message with you. I know the world feels dark at times, especially in the face of disasters like the fires. There is always hope. No matter how dark things seem, light remains. And it starts with us. The time to choose is now. Each of us can be a point of light, pushing back fear and apathy with love and faith. It doesn't require grand gestures, it begins with small choices. A prayer, a kind word, a moment of selflessness. These choices ripple outward, creating change beyond what we see. So I ask you, reflect for a moment. Where is your light? What can you do today to shine brighter and bring hope? It's not too late. As long as you have breath and love in your heart, you can make a difference. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I know it's my calling. If this message touched you, share it with your family, friends, and community. Let it inspire action and unity. And if you found it meaningful, please like, subscribe, and share. Together we can spread hope where it's needed most. God bless you, and remember, no matter how dark it gets, be the light.